It was Emma's birthday, a day I had planned to celebrate quietly but meaningfully. Nothing flashy, just a warm evening with a few close friends, soft jazz humming in the background, candlelight flickering against the walls, and a dozen balloons drifting near the ceiling. I had spent weeks organizing everything. The guest list, the playlist, even the shade of frosting on the cake. Her favorite hazelnut mocha, but she'd been distant all day. Not outright cold, just absent. Her laugh was hollow. Her eyes barely lingered on mine. She smiled at everyone but never once looked me in the eye. I watched her move through the room like a guest at someone else's party. It was around 9:30 when she finally settled beside me on the couch, the room still buzzing with soft chatter. She sipped her wine and leaned in, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "Why so quiet?" she asked, her eyes glittering not from happiness but tension, the kind that floats behind the smile of someone who knows something you don't. I stared at her for a moment. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. I had rehearsed this moment over and over in my mind, though I never thought it would come with so many eyes nearby. "Because," I said, watching her carefully, "you slept with him last night." Double quote silence. Not just from her but from everyone. The birthday candles still burned on the table. A balloon popped softly against the ceiling fan. No one moved. No one breathed. Emma blinked, her face twitching confusion. Then realization. Then guilt rushing in like flood water. Her wine glass trembled in her hand. "I don't," she stammered. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply looked at her and said, "You know who I'm talking about." Across the room, her friend Leah froze mid-laugh. Josh lowered his beer. The tension was no longer hidden. It had been dragged into the center of the room like a body no one wanted to admit seeing. I stood up slowly. "I'm not here to make a scene," I said, though the scene had made itself. "But I'm also not here to play dumb while everyone toasts to something that doesn't exist anymore." Emma opened her mouth, but I walked away before she could speak. Her birthday had become something else now, a turning point, a reckoning, a chapter she would never forget. And I wasn't done yet. I didn't storm out. I walked to the kitchen with the same calm I used to light the candles, to slice the cake, to pour her favorite wine. But this time, I opened the drawer where I had hidden the printed messages, the ones she must have thought I'd never find. They weren't traumatic, just a people messaging late at night. But the timestamps told a story, and the words told the rest. His name was Ryan, from work. The one she always said was just loud, not flirty. She had deleted their conversations from her phone. What she hadn't known was that Ryan had backed up everything to the cloud he shared with his ex. His ex, who happened to be a friend of a friend. Funny how secrets unravel themselves when you least expect it. I returned to the living room with the pages folded in my hand. Emma was still on the couch, paralyzed. Everyone else had backed away, standing in clumps near the door, or pretending to check their phones like the floor might open and save them from this moment. "I didn't want to do this like this," I said, my voice steady. "But I figured if the lie happened publicly, the truth should too." Emma finally stood. "Wait, just let me explain." I handed her the folded pages. "Explain to yourself." She hesitated, then took them. As her eyes moved across the first message, her face crumpled. Not rage, not denial, just collapse. She shook her head, her lips moving, but no words came out. "Guilt has a way of stealing language. I swear it was just one time," she finally whispered. "That's not the part that hurts," I said. "It's not the number. It's the fact that you looked me in the eye this morning and still let me plan all this. It's the way you laughed tonight while knowing I was the only one who didn't know." She opened her mouth to speak again, but I raised a hand. "No, I'm not looking for reasons. I'm not here to fight. I just wanted to be honest with you. And with myself." Her shoulders sank. "I didn't think you'd find out." And that was it. The sentence that told me everything. She wasn't sorry about what she did. She was sorry I knew. Sorry it ruined the illusion. Sorry she didn't get away with it clean. I could feel the eyes on us. Friends who'd toasted our anniversary last year. People who had sent us holiday cards with "to the perfect couple" written in gold. All of them now realizing perfection was a costume we wore to well. I turned and walked toward the hallway. She didn't follow. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't grab a coat. I just needed air. As I stepped onto the balcony, I heard the murmurs behind me. Leah whispered something to Josh. Someone opened the fridge too loudly, pretending normalcy. But nothing was normal anymore. The sliding door clicked shut behind me, muffling the room, isolating me in a little glass box where I could finally breathe. A few minutes later, it opened again. Emma stepped out, clutching the folded messages to her chest like they were love letters instead of evidence. Her voice was almost inaudible. "Please don't live like this." I looked at her, not with hatred, not with tears, just the clarity of a man whose illusion had been sliced clean. "You said you didn't think I'd find out," I replied quietly. "That's the part I can't get past. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a risk you took because you thought I was too trusting or too dumb to ever notice." She stepped closer, face splotched with tears and mascara. "I thought you were pulling away. I didn't know how to talk to you anymore. And so you talked to him." She flinched. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that. It never is, I said. There was a long silence between us. Below, the city lights blinked like nothing had changed. Above, a single balloon floated out the open window, disappearing into the night. Inside, the party had fractured. Some guests had already left. Others stayed in the kitchen pretending to be thirsty. Emma's voice broke again. Are you really ending this? I think it ended the moment you invited someone else into our intimacy, I said. This is just me catching up. She reached for my arm, but I stepped back. You made your choices, I said. And tonight, I'm making mine. She began to cry, but it wasn't the kind that wanted forgiveness. It was the cry of someone realizing the game was over and the audience hadn't applauded. I still love you. She choked. I loved you too, I whispered. So much that I planned every detail of tonight just to see you smile. And you repaid that with silence and secrets. I turned back to the party one last time, the remnants of celebration now feeling like debris after a storm. I think it's best if we end this tonight. And with that, I walked back inside, picked up my keys from the table, and left her standing on the balcony, surrounded by the ashes of everything we were. I didn't slam the door. I didn't look back. I walked out of the apartment the way you leave a funeral, not with rage, but with a quiet kind of grief. The kind that crawls down your spine and settles deep in your ribs. The hallway felt too bright, too clean. My footsteps echoed, each one louder than it had any right to be. I reached the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. That's the thing about walking away, there's always a pause where you wonder if they'll follow. She didn't. I stepped inside alone. Down in the parking garage. The cold hit me first. Then the weight of it all. The reality. We were done. She would probably still be up there, surrounded by people who didn't know whether to comfort her or run. Maybe someone would offer her tissues. Maybe someone else would quietly text their partner. Things are blowing up here. But none of that mattered. Not anymore. I opened the car door and sat in silence. The driver's seat still held the birthday gift I had picked out weeks ago, a hardcover edition of a book she once said she loved as a child. Inside it, I had tucked a note. For every page of our story, even the ones you forgot to read. I stared at it for a long time. Then I unwrapped the paper, pulled the note out, and left the book on the passenger seat. Some part of me still didn't want to throw it away. Not out of hope, but because even the broken parts of our life had been real. Before I started the engine, I sent one text. Don't call me tonight, or tomorrow, or at all. Then I drove. No destination, no music, just the night road ahead. Wide and empty. By the time I reached my apartment, I felt the fatigue hit. Emotional, physical, all of it. I stood at the door, key in hand, and finally realized I was home, but not the same person who had woken up that morning. Inside, I poured myself a glass of water and stood there for a long time, staring at nothing. The silence wasn't comforting. Not yet. But it was clean. I picked up my phone. There were already 5 missed calls from Emma, 1 voicemail, a text. Please let me explain. I'm sorry, I didn't open it. I placed my phone face down on the table, sat on the edge of the bed, and whispered to the dark, I hope one day you understand the weight of your actions. And then I slept for the first time in weeks without lying to myself. The next morning felt like the first day after a long illness where the world looks the same, but nothing inside you fits quite right anymore. I made coffee out of habit, but it tasted like ash. I sat on the balcony in yesterday's clothes and watched the street slowly fill with people pretending life made sense. By noon, I had already blocked Emma's number, not because I hated her, but because I knew I couldn't afford to hear her voice. Not now. Not when the wound was still fresh and open. Instead, I opened my laptop. The tabs came up automatically. Emails, utilities, accounts. Her name was everywhere: cosigner, joint holder, emergency contact. We had woven our lives together like vines. And now I had to untangle it all without cutting myself on the thorns. I called a lawyer. Her voice was calm, efficient. I didn't even say Emma's name. I just said, I need to begin divorce proceedings. There was a long pause. Do you have children together? No, I said, and thank God for that. No little hearts to bruise. Just mine. I hung up and sat there for a long time, staring at the wall like it owed me an apology. Grief crept in quietly, the way it does when there's no one left to be angry at. I thought about the weekends we'd spent doing nothing, watching documentaries, arguing about which takeout to get. I thought about the little hum she made while brushing her hair, the way she used to fall asleep mid-sentence. I thought about all the things I didn't want to think about, but I didn't cry instead. I opened a new document and began writing down everything I needed to do. Cancel the joint credit card, remove her from the lease, pack her boxes, cancel the vacation we'd booked for the fall. It felt robotic, but it was necessary. Each task a small act of self-rescue. By evening, I had made a full list, and for the first time in days, I felt a tiny spark of something I hadn't expected so soon. Control. Not over her, not over what happened, but over my next steps, over the pieces I could still protect. I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and stared at myself in the mirror. My eyes looked older, my mouth didn't smile. but there was something steadier in the reflection now. Clarity. And with that, I took my first real breath of the day and kept moving forward. The days blurred, not in sorrow, but in motion. I kept going, one task at a time, one boundary at a time. Emma texted again, then called from different numbers, then emailed. At first, her messages were full of apologies, long, desperate explanations. Then came the nostalgia, voice notes about how good we used to be. Finally, silence. I guess she realized I meant it. I never responded. Not once. It wasn't easy. Some nights I hovered over the keyboard, heart pounding, fingers aching to type something, to ask why, to tell her how badly it hurt. But what would that fix? I already had the answers. More words would just be reopening a door I'd finally closed. I muted her name across every app. I unfollowed her friends. I didn't care what version of me she shared with them. I wasn't going to participate in the post-mortem. Instead, I gave my energy to the small, quiet things that made me feel human again. Cleaning, reading, running, sleeping without nightmares. Friends reached out. A few came over, awkward at first. Not sure what to say. I didn't need them to say anything. I just needed them to be there. You're handling this better than anyone I've ever seen, one of them said. I smiled. It's not strength. It's survival. And it was. Every ignored message, every unopened voicemail was a silent act of self-respect. I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting myself. In the quiet, I began to hear my own voice again. Not the one that had softened itself for her comfort. Not the one that swallowed feelings to keep peace. The real one, the one that had been buried beneath compromise and conflict avoidance. I started journaling. Nothing poetic. Just simple truths. You didn't deserve this. She chose her own emptiness. You are not what she did to you. I taped the last one to my fridge. Read it every morning. And slowly, the need to respond faded. The ache dulled. The silence I had chosen didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like armor. Not a wall. A boundary. And I wasn't crossing it again. 3 weeks after the birthday, I ran into someone who didn't know. A coworker. He asked casually, "How's Emma?" I smiled politely. "We're no longer together." His face dropped. "Damn, I thought you two were solid." "Yeah, so did I. But instead of spiraling, I went home that night and cooked a real meal. Not just pasta and whatever sauce I could find. No, I put on music, chopped onions, and poured a glass of wine for myself. Healing wasn't a single moment. It was dozens of small ones. Folding clean laundry in silence, laughing at a stupid podcast while walking to the store, watching a show she hated just because I liked it. I started seeing pieces of myself I had neglected. I'd become so used to making room for Emma's preferences that I forgot what it was like to enjoy things alone. I rediscovered old hobbies: sketching, late-night guitar strumming, books I used to lose myself in. One night, a friend who had stayed silent during the party texted me out of the blue. "You did something I couldn't have. You kept your dignity when everyone else would have lost it." I stared at the message for a while, not because I needed validation, but because I hadn't realized how many people had witnessed not just the betrayal but my response. People notice. They remember. Not the drama, but the grace. I started going to the gym again. Started showing up early to work. I felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally stopped carrying things that weren't mine to hold. Emma had taken something from me. That was undeniable. But what I had taken back? My voice, my values, my time. And slowly, that started to feel like power. Not the kind that crushes, but the kind that rebuilds. I looked back on that birthday not as a grave but as a spark. The night I stopped begging for love and started choosing myself. And every day since, I had been honoring that choice. It's been months now. The candles from that night are long gone. The cake Anita was thrown out the next morning. Her gifts, donated, except for one, the book. I still keep it on the shelf, not out of longing but as a reminder that love, even when it fails, still matters. Sometimes I still think about what I would have done if she had told me before, if she had been honest, if she had broken my heart with truth instead of betrayal. But those thoughts don't linger the way they used to. They pass, like weather. What stays is the peace. I never posted about the breakup, never aired it out online. I let people make their own assumptions. Some think I walked out for no reason. Others heard whispers. But the truth, the full truth, was never for them. It was for me. And I already knew it. That was enough. Emma never came to pick up her things. I had a courier drop them at her sister's house. She texted to say thank you. I didn't respond. The last thing I heard, she had started seeing someone new. Good for her. I meant that. Not out of grace but detachment. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not waiting for her to hurt the way I did. I'm not writing imaginary speeches in my head about what I should have said. I said exactly what I needed to, and I left exactly when I had to. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was a story about choice. About walking away when staying would have meant erasing parts of myself. And I didn't erase myself. I reclaimed him, the man who celebrates others without losing his own voice. The man who values peace over performance. The man who doesn't shout to be heard but speaks the truth anyway. So no, I don't regret the birthday. It wasn't the end of love. It was the beginning of self-respect, and I'll take that kind of gift every time.